Oh, okay. Well, I started this Barbarossa thing. I kind of pushed to do it to get it started before the con, and I had some vague thoughts that maybe I could play a little bit during the con, but that was way too much. I basically came home, dropped into bed, and barely could get out the door in the morning. Um, it takes an hour to go each way, and anyway, now here I am, and I have no idea what I'm doing. I know I'm starting a new turn, but it was, maybe I made a mistake trying to push to get it started before the con, but I was really dragging my feet about getting started about this at all. Anyway, we're going to start with reinforcements. We haven't really seen this before. They go into cities you control in your home country, and rely. So the miners, the Italians have special rules in this scenario, and we'll just get started from there, I guess. Lending resources, that doesn't really apply to anything. All right. For the Germans, the reinforcements were fairly easy. The Italians had to go in Warsaw. Other folk, home country, largely that meant East Prussia, just to get some easier access because the front's closer right there, right now. Once we gain some ground there, maybe we'll be building stuff, I don't know, I guess in Czechoslovakia or West Poland, and trying to push forces there. But there's one Russian fortification unit over here, and I have to kind of worry about that. All it does is it's going to have any attacks through the hex sides it provides, and if everything attacks through it, the defender gets the the choice of what kind of terrain to use. So I got a couple of kind of choices. One, Kiev looks kind of exposed. I'm probably going to be falling back. So to some extent, that seems like a bonus place to put it. I can't put it up in Leningrad, which I would have liked to have done. But there's a zone of control going into there. So I'm not allowed to build it there. Kind of surprised there isn't a fortress there already, actually. I guess I have to force the Finns back if I'm going to fortify Leningrad. Sev's already got an on-map fortress, and it doesn't add anything to that. So Kiev looks kind of interesting, but I lose part of the advantage, the possibility of, picking the attack type. I already have that with the city. So then there's kind of the question of, well, do I want to stretch it down and maybe stretch my line down and put a fixed fortification in place? That gives me a little bit less flexibility than maybe I'd like, but I think I don't want to do that. I think I'm going to be falling back, and yes, the southern front down here is weaker units, but I don't think I can just say, no, nothing's getting through there. So I'll probably put it in Kiev. Other option is down here. Can't tell what's blue and what's red. Oh, there's a blue and a red there. That's how they're different. I read about these things in the rules, and then I don't, until I have the map out and I'm playing, I don't really recognize what's going on. Alrighty. Looking at this situation, I think the Germans went first and last turn. And so I think this should be down to 0. Which means either side can ask for a reroll. I rolled, and the Russians got another action. How big a deal is this? See, they got some units trapped here in a pocket that if the Germans go first, the Russians aren't going to be able to get them out easily. And I think, because I oozed forward with my Hungarians and I didn't ooze back with my Russians, I think that's probably worth asking for a reroll. But asking for a reroll means I lose another point off the initiative. Alright, I'll let the Russians go first, I guess. Okay, trying to be a little more careful with the sequence of play now, as I mentioned before. I've actually put all the little turns, but neatly enough, this is actually how the rulebook is organized. Procedurally, according to the sequence of play, almost entirely. Which makes it more difficult to grasp some things, there's no question of that. But it does make it a better reference and indicates why there aren't numbers cross-referencing everywhere there. I am trying to catch up with the rulebook cross-references, putting them in. I thought the paper might be too glossy, but it actually does hold pencil better than some of the really crappy stuff. The old rulebook would have been better, but whatever. There's significant changes. You know, I talked to the guys playing it. I don't think I caught this on video at all. But my impression of the old 5th edition, that you could do it in a weekend, is about right. They got through about half the war in a solid week of play. About equivalent to, say, what Empires and Arms players got through. You got to figure they're not as... They didn't manage as quick a play as maybe we did back when I was, you know, in my mid-20s. With the con, things are a little bit more relaxed than maybe than if you really had a devoted attempt to play through. People aren't playing 12 hours a day or whatever. You know, we're all older, right? But anyway, there's a significant boost in time spent on the game with the deluxe edition, final edition, etc. Just there's more pieces in play and more decisions to make, and the rules have gotten more complex, for good or ill. Anyway, doing that following, I decided not to do any ground strikes, which was really the first thing that's of interest in a purely land campaign. I'm doing a land attack here. It's not absolutely got to be that way. There is, you know, the Germans moved their boat into here. The Russians could contemplate doing some naval action down here, but largely I'm trying, you know, not to take advantage of possible flaws that are there, but also you know, to try to get used to some of the activities that would be required about in regard to that. I have no defenses here at Sevastopol, which is actually kind of problematic. I may have to worry about that, actually. Am I allowed a naval move? I may be. I should be. Yeah, I am allowed a naval mission, so I'm going to sail this fleet out. And I can't remember crap about anything anymore. All these numbers, right? So I'm worried about the movement allowance and the range. The range isn't too important in this case. I'm not going very far, but the movement allowance is. So I've got 5s and 6s, I've got 4s, I've got some old stuff. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4 to get me out to here. And that should provide enough of a defense to prevent the Romanian Navy, which isn't terribly impressive, from doing anything. I don't think I have any transports here, so I don't know quite what it could do. But okay, you know. Now, the other thing I wanted to do that I've been kind of ignoring is I want to move one of my factories. Moving a factory by rail, over in the rules, it indicates it costs 2 of my rail moves to move a factory. I only have 3 in an air-land move. So I'll only be able to move 1 of my factories. And the question there comes to, well, which one? I've got Vitebsk here, and I've got Kiev. In a sense, just doing Barbarossa, maybe I'm better off not moving my factories. Because if I move it, unless I'm going to give one of these up, if I move it, it takes 2 turns before I get production from it. So it's really not going to make too much effect. But that's where I would do that. I think I'll hold off on doing that. So since I'm not doing ground strikes, and I don't think I'm going to be doing any rail movement, I don't want to flip my units particularly. I'll go to my land movement and start trying to extricate some of these pieces out of this gap here and try to set up a new defensive line here. A thought came to my mind. I'm out of supply here, simply because of the German zones, which means I can move a hex, but I'll flip, which means I'm not going to have a good defensive line there. Flipped units not only are weaker, but they also provide a penalty over on the combat chart. So I'm going to have real trouble holding the Ukraine, I think. There's an additional effect I'm thinking here. Oh, when is supply determined for movement? I think it's determined across the whole board that there's a supply check. But I'm not positive of that. I gotta find. Well, looking at 2.4 for supply. Let's see when it says to check it, because if it's just before movement, I could slip a unit in here, trace a supply line in, and then be able to move out without flipping. And I might be able to, extricate some of these units into a usable line, although still too close to the Germans for my taste. We got kind of caught there. Before it moves, yeah, it looks like I do it. Yeah, in fact, the example indicates that I can push a unit to establish a supply line to extricate to move other units. So we're going to see, if we can push, say, this cav unit into place here to provide an exit route for the Russian units. It's not going to be a very fast exit, because the problem is my supply line. Yeah, I'm still moving zone of control to zone of control, so I immediately stop from that. See, it was actually fairly easy to get most of the units off the line. I do have this engineer here. He's just stuck in back here because I used the cav. I would have been stuck with a core here otherwise. I'd rather sacrifice the one stacking, the half stacking point or whatever of an engineer. I'm only allowed 3 units. No more than 2 can be bigger than divisions. So that's what we kind of have here. This is just overrun bait. It's not going to slow anything down really. But, overrun requires mechs, if I recall correctly. And there isn't a lot of mechanized force here. And it also, allowed me to build a fairly strong line here. Not as strong as I'd like. There aren't a lot of units here. I've still got units in Kiev. I could actually throw 1, 2 up here. I don't really like leaving a singular line like that because it's easy for breakthrough, but without a lot of armored forces, we're not going to see that happen. So we'll just count on the resilience of the Russian line to hold that. We'll see how well that does. Up here, things are a little weaker. We've pulled back a little bit, found a woods line, gave up a hex here that was of some value. We haven't really given up much yet. So the Germans are going to have to bash their way through. Now, they have a lot more power up in the north, though. A lot more armor, etc. Oh, yeah, and Zhukov came in this turn. He's, along with a little armored reserve. I'm planning on using that for a potential counterattack. I have an offensive chit. Let's see how that works. I feel like the game gave me bad advice in terms of protecting Archangel for this scenario. I don't see how any German fleets can get up here and threaten Archangel. So maybe I'm missing something. I guess paratroopers or something. But it doesn't, this is not a join. This is like a map box. So I don't even think paratroopers can get in there easily. So I'm sending this extra, garrison or whatever, down slowly. I could rail it as we get into later impulses. I could have railed it now, but I kind of like to see, how the attack's developing and where the front line is before, or is likely to be for next turn before I expend a rail move on that. Same with this, which is slowly moving out of Moscow. You know, Moscow's not going to fall anytime soon until I get within range of a paradrop. I seem to have gotten myself horribly out of position here. I've got Rundstedt, my armored commander, down here. I'm out of supply out here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just a little bit out. But I can actually supply back to Rundstedt and then further on. So that's, you know, I would be out of supply if it wasn't for the leader. Some of these guys may be, these guys are okay too. They can go back to a secondary source and then trace back. But the problem is, I think I've only got 2 commanders, two headquarters units. And Rundstedt is one of them. There may be another, well, I've got the Romanian, and I've got Bach over here, or Beck or something like that. I can't read. Bach. I can't find another one. I'm hunting for it. But this is more the infantry force, and there's more armor up here, and it's the infantry commanders can't rally the armored units, which causes, well, maybe they can, but at a penalty. But it causes a serious problem for me. So I thought I was in a position where I would be able to do something there. I also just found out that my battery hasn't been charging that I thought would be charged fully up over the last week. Stupid plug situation here. We'll see if I can do anything with the Germans, but this is where the game gets really tough. So, like, I get the OCS pushing the supply forward, counting that up, getting that ready. It's harder for me to think in terms of, oh yeah, I need the right kind of headquarters in the right area to be able to do all this stuff. All the different mechanisms that I need to take into account and whiff are far less intuitive to me than they are, say, in OCS. And certainly less intuitive than they are in the A3R World at War series for me. And it makes it really kind of a nightmare to play the game. If you're used to it, yeah, you're familiar with that kind of situation. Of course, slick on slick, counters on map. I mean, just looking for pieces makes me start causing disasters as I go. And blundering on as we are, barely got any gains. I mean, we took a couple of the key hexes in the defensive line here. The Russian defense here is so weak, but I just can't get anything on it. And down here, it's absolutely hopeless. I took out that engineer, but I had to do an assault, which meant pretty good chance that my units were flipped. I also took a flip over here. Still got fresh units here that attacked. That was cool. And that's actually where my biggest opening was. Bombardments didn't do much. This was the one place I think I managed to flip a unit. The penalty due to the woods is a pain in the ass. Over here in Leningrad, that wasn't going to be good either. I'm trying to fly the Finnish planes. I'll probably recover that, take another shot at it. Basically, I got a 1 in 6 chance with each plane to Manstein or Mannerheim is able to recover 1 plane. I don't know, I used my 2 and not my 1. The Russians neglected to do any air defense for the most part. I don't think there was any air-to-air combat. I just let the Germans do their bombing because, you know, they've got more planes coming, and there's no real big advantage to the. I gotta flip this if I'm doing that. There's no real big advantage to trying to cover against what are probably not going to be successful attacks. Just let him wear himself out. You might get the opportunity for the big counterattack. Although I doubt that. The Russians don't have that much either. It's just we're not seeing, you know, we're not going to see the big Barbarossa be effective here. And that's because I don't know what I'm doing, you know. And that's going to be a problem no matter what with this game. You really have to kind of study the situation and be willing to put more thought into it than I'm ever willing to put into a game to get it to work right here. Well, Russian position was not that good either. Things look way too weak to try to hold a line where I had it. I've fallen back a little bit. I'm still not very comfortable. I've got some real weak spots in it. You know, like with the Germans before, I'm sure they can put some concentration, get a break. Not a breakthrough necessarily. This is, you know, they'll be able to force the river line here. Here they're not going to be able to because of the interlocking zones, but here they can slip in across the river. I just don't have the troops to protect everything. And I don't really have the capability to swing back, say, and just defend, say, this swamp up here, and give up there. The way things were positioned, I needed to shift over a little bit. I pulled the unit from Moscow by rail, which flipped, and then that garrison unit, which also flipped, so things are weaker there. I don't really have any desire to launch any attacks. Ground strikes to try to slow the German movement forward, they're a possibility. Might be better using ground support with my planes at this point for defense, just to add the strength to the defense of the Hex, because in surprise situations, not official surprise, but where ground strikes succeed and weaken a stack enough, a few extra points from the air support might be enough to reduce the odds. I've not been really following through. I was planning on using that partial odds situation. That helps the attacker a little bit. You don't have to be as careful with your points, but it's as much of a pain as counting the odds are, basically. You have to do an extra division and figure out the percentage proportion you have. So I don't know. I've been kind of ignoring that as a little bit of chrome that's just a little bit too much in a game that's already really laden with it. All right, we have some German successes here in the north where there was that open area punched through there, and it's slow going to move through. I don't know if I'm really doing that badly here. I mean, I'm getting some good momentum going as far as I can tell in terms of pushing in the north. Used some airstrikes, one was successful. Managed to get a automatic, blitzkrieg success. Down here I had a failure against the one Russian unit that was holding the southern flank of the northern corridor, as it were. However, Runstedt or whatever got into range where he could recover some of the damaged units. So that's not so bad. Over here we got a breakthrough using the assault table. We couldn't get it quite up to the 10-1, but we got it to the 7-1. It's pretty likely. If you look, the stars start way up on the 4. And I had a +1 due to a flipped unit there as well. So I've pushed in, and I'm kind of degrading the Russian position. They'll probably have to fall back again there. This is where they have their fortress, though, for whatever that's worth. I guess that's about it. The Russian impulse caused some problems. We got a rain effect. That's going to put a modifier on the German weather next turn. More of a possibility of a slight, of bad weather. It could get actually significantly worse even. Basically, when weather starts going bad in the summer, it just keeps getting bad, right? Or it has more chance of staying bad. But most of the summer weather is really good. Because of that, the Russians are limited in their movement, which made it harder to get out of places. But we did manage to pull back a little bit over here. You can see just that kind of cracking into the line, and you're going to start seeing it here too, where if you don't have a solid line, it starts to get subverted. But if you leave one unit per hex, it's too easy to overwhelm the enemy forces. And we're really in kind of a bind here. This is our stronger front. Over here, we're constantly giving ground in the east. See, we pulled out a Riga. The rain was kind of helpful. It allowed the ships to slip through without an interception. It wasn't going to be a very likely interception anyway. We're only over on the 2 box there, which, geez, I don't remember those numbers. Those are the surprise numbers, I think. With the interception, you roll what against the actual box that you're in. The search number in the highest section, see? This is what sucks with this game, is There's no good key. There's the terrain effects chart. There's no good key, and I don't think the map's adequately described early on. I may be mistaken about that. You know, I tend to be so... I tend to make mistakes pretty easily. Maybe it's under general concepts. Sea areas. That's the area itself, I think. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look to see if I can find out what the different numbers in those boxes mean. This is, you know, it's a really tough game to learn, and once you know that piece of information, it's not that big a deal. It's not like the TC, which you have to look up because there's some weird movement values there. But anyway, either way, I'm pretty sure the Russians made it through from the die roll. One problem that I've got, though, is I can't do a rebase with this guy because he's been flipped already. You can see pulling out a Riga, I'm exposing him. I also have, you know, this line is just getting weaker and weaker, and I think the North is really in a lot of danger here of collapse. I have no idea how to count the victory points for this. I mean, I know what the rules are on that, more or less. It's 1 point for each city plus 1 for each, you know, of the, I don't know how many special objectives that are the worldwide objectives. Things like Moscow and Leningrad count against that. But the problem is it also counts all the things in German territory here as well, and it just ends up being kind of like a balanced number. And I've got no idea how to find that. One of the things that I had found, though, is we've got a list of all the factories and resources. It doesn't quite correspond with what I calculated for Russia, the only one I checked, so I don't know. But anyway, we can see the Russians are being forced to give up more ground again. This isn't, you know, some kind of pounding blitzkrieg like you see in a game like Third Reich, where it feels like the Germans kind of forced the Russian line back. Here it's more like, well, they got a little bit of an advantage in one hex. It's not like they're pounding through everywhere as they do in the Barbarossa. Of course, the scale's a little different. Nor is it, you know, the Hitler's war also up there. You know, these huge movements that are just absolutely silly. You see the Russians giving up ground in incremental bits and losing units in the incremental bits, and it's kind of nice to watch it happen. I don't know how well I am on schedule here, but we are definitely making advances, and they're advances that they're forced. You know, the Russians aren't just giving up ground, I think, for no reason. They have a real weakness there, but they're not just seeing their whole army collapse in front of the Germans. They're able to conduct some operations. Now, if I had had better weather, maybe I could pick off a unit. I have some armored units. I have Zhukov. I might be able to do a limited counteroffensive. It's risky, though, you know. But I should be doing one just because I can recover the units after the attack. I don't want to do it on a rain turn, though. I want to do it after the Germans have expended some effort for the turn, maybe had some flipped units, don't have much capacity to recover, and either to halt an advance, flipping units, or to actually maybe even regain ground, although that's really unlikely because it's hard for the Russians at this point with the forces they have to be able to make an attack that's sustainable. I mean, they could have certainly attacked a unit like this that's out hanging out there in the air, but I don't really, again, not on a rain turn. That was a fairly strong stack, as you can see, so we'll give them their ground instead. German impulse this time was kind of interesting. We got rain and storm, kind of the worst of weather, and that obviously mucked up the possibilities of a German advance tremendously, although they did still manage an assault here against the city and got a shatter result. flipped unit, gave them a +1, la la la. They did have, they had like 7-to-1 odds, which is pretty good on the assault table. Fair chance of them not flipping. But they get 2 odds ships, which isn't 2 columns, remember, just 2 odds levels down to 5-to-1, and ended up taking that. They overran a plane there and another plane back here. They're setting up here, and right now I've got, let's see, we had an 11 as the roll, which I think that moved this 2 spaces actually, and that gives us 2 stars for the next turn, which I thought I actually had here, but I probably pulled it off, so we'll have to grab another little marker. There aren't markers in the game for this. I had some very disappointing news. I'm expecting to see Gathering Storm for a World at War. You know, I don't do a lot of research on games. I'm a lazy bum about a lot of things, and I've been really kind of, you know, the whole World at War Gathering Storm thing has been kind of this nightmare situation for me. I like Rising Sun and Third Reich, Advanced Third Reich, and I was kind of looking forward to, hey, let's get a DoD2 type or DoD type game for a World at War, see how that all pulses together. What I didn't realize, they're not going to include anything for the Far East. The whole Asian area is not part of the design, which really sucks, and kind of, I feel like I wasted $150, you know, 100 for a World of War, 50 or whatever, maybe more than that, 65, whatever for Gathering Storm, more than that, closer to 200. I would have never bought both of them. I'm sick of systems that, like, you know, are half complete, and I would have just delayed it out. I'll get to playing it, but it's really discouraged me a great deal. Anyway, that was our weather for this time. The modifier. See if the Russians can recuperate. They're really getting busted up here. You know, I was so proud of. No, I wasn't. I was so discouraged at my ability to handle the Germans. Well, you know, I've defended with the Russians before, back in WIF 5 when it was easier, but here I just didn't have enough back here to really hold the Germans off, and we're seeing. You know, if this line hadn't been as strong as it was, though, the Germans would be making advances there. We're seeing the Germans are making, you know, close to reasonable advances in the north. And I can't say it feels at all unrealistic the way it's going. The storms meant I couldn't even fly planes up here. Here I get penalties with it. I kind of forgot that we got a weather zone change there during the Russian turn. And now with +2 modifier, we get a fair chance of rain just continuing. Overall, I'd say that's bad for the Germans. They were making good advances, but now they're kind of fatiguing out over here. I don't even know. I do have a general back here, but I'm kind of planning on using him on that assault to support that. I don't want to get the general involved in an attack. The most dangerous thing about throwing your general in is, or your headquarters, you can use his strength points and everything, but you never want him to flip. So if you can't get a guaranteed result over in the 7-to-1, 10-to-1 column, you kind of don't want to do it, because he can recharge units that are going to flip and use them for another attack, which is far more valuable than wasting your headquarters on the attacks. It did allow me, though, air rebases up in the storm area and in the rain. So I've managed to push the German planes up a little bit. Found some units that I had been forgetting to move. This guy, some guys down here that, you know, were stacked under planes, whatever. All part of the cost of playing WIF. There's so many units and so much going on the board. Yeah, even with Barbarossa, it's you know, it's a big effort to play. Keep getting high rolls, more terrible weather. The Russians would love to pass, have given them a 1 through 3 for the turn end, but they couldn't afford to. They absolutely needed to get out of this hex. They were in back here and elsewhere. There was a little bit of manipulation of their locations. I think they pulled out of Odessa as well. That was risky. They could supply there, but using the navies, I think they have some sort of convoy or something there. But they want to keep a solid line, because losing this would be cutting cutting the Crimea open for them. So pulling back a little bit worked. Here, well, this is good terrain, and I don't want to give it up until I have to. It's going to be kind of ugly. I'm going to probably pull into the swamp, but, you know, which is even better terrain. But right now, let's prevent the German advance as much as possible. It's something like 4 bad rolls in a row. We got ourselves all the way up to storm in both with my little hats. Germans attempted an attack. This one would have been like a 1-to-1, which is just terrible in this system. This one was 6-to-1 down to 3-to-1, I think. Yeah, it was 5-to-1 down to 3-to-1. It's only supposed to be 2 column shifts, but I think it was 6-to-1. Probably would have got me 4-to-1, but anyway, the Germans took a loss. The Russians did not. The Germans flipped, but that's the end of the turn, basically. There's some cleanup to do, unflipping and such not. Bring some forces on. I'd say we did pretty well with the Germans, given the terrible weather, but mainly that's because the Russians had no defenses up here, basically. Have to make some decisions on rebasing, because our fleets are beginning to get tired. I think we'll probably want to keep this sub out here in the 1 box. The Russians just sailed out, so they can probably stay out there. I have to be kind of careful. That means, you know, if I don't have a lot of fleets out in the box, it means that there is potential for the Russians to sortie out. But are they really going to leave Leningrad behind where they have 1 armor? Well, we'll see what kind of reinforcements they have. Maybe they have something that they can use for some sort of invasion, but I doubt it. I got Helsinki covered here with the headquarters, and landing back here is just asking for it. I'm not going to be able to keep things in supply if we go to naval combat. And this is really not, you know, supposed to be a naval situation. It's just there are some openings possible, and I'd rather avoid doing them and try to play more for the land game, but I can't avoid them completely. I've got to leave garrisons where it's important. I can't let, you know, Romania fall because there's, you know, no garrison there, for example. All right, let's go to the end turn cleanup. Okay, and as we push into the September-October turn, and we could get good weather here, I think the modifier, the +2 modifier from the last impulse keeps in play here. This is going to be, well, we don't know whose turn it's going to be, but the initiative didn't move. I did production. The Germans bought all their infantry in the first turn, or a lot of their infantry, so they could only, even though their gearing was way up there, they could only buy 4 more infantry. They upgraded their fighters so that they got 4 of them this time instead of 3. They can move it by 1 each time. They bought a tactical air, which I probably should have had more of them last time. I don't know why I bought so many fighters. TAC air is more useful. And I bought a motorized unit. Now, the motorized unit's the problematic one. That's way out here. That comes in on the last turn of the game, and it's not going to be able to reach the battlefield. So I could probably stop production pretty soon. Next turn, you know, maybe some planes or something can come in, but we're not really terribly interested in that. For the Russians, they built their same 4 infantry, 1 fighter. They lost a factory here at Odessa, but nice lightning going on. It still rounds up. They're halved. They had 28 factories, so they can use 14 of them. While they go down to 27, they can still use 14. So they haven't lost any real production. The big thing they're losing is land. I'm not going to be worrying about scoring this game. I may not even worry about finishing it. I may well play next turn and that's it. Or I don't know, maybe not even the whole of next turn, depending on how the weather starts to go. The storms really kind of pushed the weather nasty ways this last turn and shoved the impulse track up faster than the Germans probably would have liked. So they're in for worse weather than, you know. They're certainly getting some pretty bad weather here for the July-August turn. Geez, I've been doing weather individually for each impulse. It's actually for each pair of impulses, which is kind of a hard thing to do, to remind yourself of, because you have to remember who went first. You kind of have to remember that anyway to recall this. and then do a little bit of mental calculation. Nothing major, but you have to get in the spirit of it, the same as many other things in the game. In this case, it's because, hey, this doesn't always move forward one space. Sometimes it's two, which can leave you in a situation where sometimes impulses will begin on an odd. Yeah, they should always begin on an odd, but sometimes you'll be in the middle. Well, no, not necessarily. We got threes in here too. So yeah, sometimes an impulse set, I think, can begin on an odd number, can't it? Or an even number. Let's see. Guess it doesn't really make sense because each pair of impulses will be doubled, but sometimes you're in the middle of an impulse set and it'll be an even number, and sometimes it'll be an odd number. And that kind of leaves my wander away. And honestly, anything in with, my wander away strategy isn't that big a thing probably for people who sit down and play it straight through, but, well, yeah, straight through. No, we sit down and play it, for 8 hours at a time or whatever, and they can just write down something of that effect or make it to the end of the turn. Instead, though, even if you're playing pretty solidly, there's a lot going on in Whiff, and it's very easy to forget something like the impulse track. I don't really like having to write down a lot of notes. I've got all these, I've got this. But anyway, I've been screwing this up, and I should be doing it every other active impulse. So I'll be rolling it for the axis here. Now, I believe the stars, this is why I was checking it up. I believe the stars have an effect even across turn. With another bad weather, here's my quick solution, at least for this one. I can put a 2 out here where the next die roll is going to be, because this will shift, this will shift. Of course, I don't know if I have a 0, but you find little workarounds that'll help you, remind you where you are in the game. And with that terrible weather, the Germans really didn't want to waste their attacks now. There's a good chance they'll get better weather, even though it's September, October, and it is pretty bad no matter what. I was up on the 9. That means I'm going to have, it should only be +1 and not +2. Oops. I'll replace that. But what it means is, I don't want to waste that first impulse. Everything's fresh and everything, but I'm going to give the Russians a chance to get out. Now here they're going to have trouble getting out. This was the big disadvantage the Russians were considering a reroll. One way I can mark the initiative, this thing flips over to Axis and Allied initiative markers. So that'll help me keep track of who went first in a given turn, along with the die to indicate whose impulse it is currently. So that would work. You know what I forgot? I forgot to pay attention to my damn pilots. I don't remember how many planes I brought in this turn. I think I brought in about 4 Russians and maybe 6 Germans. Those all have to be supplied with pilots. It's probably not a big deal in this scenario, but I haven't bought any additional pilots. And not gonna run through them all though. They give you a nice pool of pilots available so that you can keep building airplanes at cheap price. So yeah, the Germans didn't actually do any attacks because there's a -2 odds shift up here, -1 down here. We're hoping for the weather to break. And of course the Russians aren't going to waste their few counterattacks that they'll be making throughout the game on this possibility. I've got to do my air rebases though. I haven't done them yet. One of the pain in the ass issues of the game, perhaps, in terms of planning, is you don't know how far your units are going to be able to move. If the weather clears up for the rest of the impulse, for the rest of the turn, things like this might actually be able to make some decent ground 1-2 mountains costs only 2, I think, to cross. I can't find the mountain. There it is. Only 2 for leg units to cross. So this would be 1, 2, 4. I could get here. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 2 impulses. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3 impulses. There's a chance these units could actually get into the fighting. I railed a couple of them up, but those get flipped and become much less useful. You know, I know I'm not going to get to use them during this turn, and they may actually be a liability. I can't get them in the front line because of that. There has cleared, and the Germans have kind of an interesting situation. They've launched a bunch of air attacks. And one of the nice things is, hey, if you launch them across the line, you get a weakness somewhere, you can reposition your units to attack where that weakness is. So there's a lot of flexibility to the attacker doing things by the order, as it were. Oh, I wanted to launch an air attack on this. That's in the woods he's halved. That's not good, but... Anyway. We're doing an air combat here in Leningrad, and the Russians faced off against the Finnish fighter. There was a Finnish bomber in play too. I decided to put the Finnish bomber on first. The Russians destroyed the Finnish bomber. They got a DX. The defender gets to choose which to lose. He chose to lose his bomber because the fighter is really his cover against this attack. And then when the Finnish fighter fired back, it got a high roll, which ended up being DC clears. And that opens up an optional rule that I'm playing with. If I can remember the options, I'll play with them. That's why I have the artillery and everything on the map. By the way, I found out what the gray is. It just means it's artillery. All the artillery has it. I just hadn't noticed these guys have it too. So it's just normal artillery fire. Somebody pointed that out to me on the video. So anyway, the defender clear creates a balanced combat opportunity. I can attack something. Now I'd rather attack the bomber here, and the only penalty to this is I get thrown to the rear of the line. So if this was, you know, my best fighter and I held a whole line of fighters with bonuses, this would be cool, but I don't. So I'm firing at 4 to 2 is +2, and this is just a single magical roll I get to do. And 7, I get an AA. The attacker's aborted. Right? Attacker aborts. Defender's front fighter or bomber. Wait. Jesus, I don't know. So there's no chance. Attacker destroys defender's front fighter. Defender destroys own front fighter or bomber. Yeah, there's no chance of you losing your own unit when you hit. So I managed to abort this bomber. It's going to be heading home. I'll flip it over like that. And I could stick around, or I could break off the combat. The Russians kind of need their planes for defense, so they would rather break off their fighter, I think, rather than actually fight. So these are going to go home then. And we'll conduct the rest of the bombings. Another interesting factor about the air combat here, it's in so much detail. It's kind of like fighting out the battles in La Grande Guerre, which is one reason I probably don't want to give Fatal Alliances. I can't imagine it being better on the political side of things, although I know it's involved in them, and I don't know if it would be better in the military side either. I love the combat system for La Grande Guerre. Anyway, what reminds me of that is I was presented with a hard choice here with the Russians. They managed to get a destroy. And now I had a choice between destroying this bomber, which would probably abort its mission if this fighter doesn't get aborted, or destroy this rich, powerful fighter. Well, I took the fighter out instead. Now, that's a hard choice because, well, the fighter still gets a shot back even though it's destroyed. The way the sequence goes, although the results have to be applied before you see the next die roll, the die roll still happens for that fighter. So it was able to shoot back, and it actually aborted the Russian fighter, which means the bomber is going to get a result wherever it was. Shit, I think it's in here. and I'll pull my fighter back a little bit. And now the bomber gets, hey, it's good weather. I don't know if a city, I think a city has one. No overrun. No, aircraft aren't affected here. Aircraft are halved in that forest. Yeah, that's noted up here. Glad to be back with my old camera. I took my new one to the con. And it's so hard to tell whether it's recording or not. You push the button and it doesn't automatically give you feedback. And I ended up losing some interviews on it, and it really sucked. Anyway, there's the bomber. That was successful. So we flip a unit of our choice. Now, here we could flip this one. It'll lose 4 strength points, or this one will lose 4. Either one's a flipped unit. I think I'd rather flip the big unit because it can be more of a pain later on, I suppose, if somehow it's not flipped and the Germans get to fly back. And we'll probably be pulling that artillery into place too. Really mixed results for the Germans here. We busted through, but we're weakened. Without armor, couldn't use the big blitzkrieg table, and we took results on the assault table that stopped us. We didn't have a great roll. We had a couple of bonuses because there were a couple of flipped units. Actually, one of the units survived. I was able to take a stupid little Russian division instead of this motorized corps, which, you know, those divisions really kind of beef up your defenses in a sense, because the results usually, never seem to go above 2. The game was designed with 2 stacking limit in mind. So those divisions save one of the big units. That feels a little funny, but, well, it makes them incredibly effective, where this would have killed 2 big Russian units. Over here we took Vitebsk, and we actually pounded through up here at Novgorod and ended up wiping out quite a bit, really, of the Russian northern line. But over here we were flipped, and we had to unflip. We also did an unflip over here. You can't see them. They're under those units. I stiffened the defenses, and that's just the headquarters, recovering the units that are in there. So the Russian line does not look like it's holding. But points-wise, if we look at the scenario, there's a lot of points down here. If you look at the 41, 42 line, it's down here now. Whenever the 41 scenario starts, I'm not sure when that's supposed to, what that line's supposed to mean. Probably the winter counterattack or something. I'm not sure. But my guess is that this is about where I'm supposed to get. And this is 42 here. You don't see a 41 line anywhere near here. Is that it? Oh, geez. So these may be end lines or something. So I've got quite a bit here I've got to pick up, but I'm pretty happy. Granted, I see 41, I'm making it up there. But I'm pretty happy that I made those advances. But all the victory point hexes for the scenario are here, so I'm probably losing the scenario as the Germans. But I'm not too upset with what the results came out as. I've done a lot of damage to the Russians. Well, the Russians pulled back a little bit again. Probably ought to give up this hex too. No real reason to be there. And got a real problem up here. That's all open, and that's all just woods, I think. Can't tell. There's some differentiation in the color there, but it looks like that's just my lighting or something. The Russians actually fired off an airstrike at one of the German armor up here. Slow the advance. Over here, I don't think they did so. Everything was under fighter cover here. This would have been a nice unit to attack. Would have been a real mistake if the Germans didn't have a fighter covering it. Because an unflipped headquarters is, a major resource that can unflip a bunch of units and plow in for another attack. Additionally, that headquarters has got a significant amount of strength. But I don't want to risk it in an attack that's not a guaranteed star, basically, unless it's a really, really key attack, right? So instead, we,
we didn't want to risk our bombers either where there was a fighter present. The fighter... Actually, there wasn't a fighter present. Yeah, we got a bomber going in there. These aren't fighters. Okay, stupid Germans. Alright, we're dropping this bomber on it. It's got a good range. So on a 1 through 3, I take out that headquarters. Oh well, what a shame. But yeah, we're falling back a little bit here. We filled in the gap here. And we'll see what the Germans can do. This is going to be my last turn. Then I'm going to switch to the Pacific. Germans used their naval air to bombard into Leningrad. And succeeded in flipping the unit they actually threw the Finns into, and I think whatever the first unit was rolled a 1, so it was flipped. We've got some other attacks launched. We're going against the headquarters here. That's going to be a tough fight. That's a 12 strength. We may not actually attack it. But we're really not in a position to... we weren't in a position to airstrike it. Our planes were too far away. I do have another opportunity here. I can launch ships to attack. Now, the number up here is actually a negative penalty. I thought it was maybe surprise number. This number here is a penalty for bombardment, I guess. Or maybe it's a bonus for bombardment. I'm not sure. We have it here. Shore bombarding, add their bombardment factors to an attack. You reduce it by each SCS by the bombardment modifier. So the number up in this section is the bombardment modifier. I didn't, again, there's no map key that I could find that told me this. It was only when I get to the shore bombardment rule. And for the ships, that would be using this right-hand number here for shore bombardment. There's a lot of different values here. I don't think the ships were able to provide anti-air cover for the armor. That's only if they're actually port attacked directly. So at this point, we've got that attack set up. I'm not sure if I'm launching an attack here. I didn't really have any air power that I could project, although I did set up a potential here. You can see I got a flipped unit, so I might have something there. Might be shifting some strength points around before I launch that. I probably don't need the shore bombardment. I can only add as much as I have units. This is only 1 strength point, so it's probably pretty easy for me to get 10 to 1 or whatever that I need for the assault going in there. You can also see I'm setting up for an off-map attack to start taking the Murmansk Archangel area as well. Just score some points up there. Cut Russia off in the north completely. Give them no ability to trace, Lend-Lease or anything like that on the European map. So that's pretty sweet, actually. And there's a big gap opening up here. The Russians can't hold the north the way I've got things set up right now, it looks like. Oops. Okay, so I only launched a couple of attacks here. I don't know what to do with these damn paratroopers because paradrops are so awful. Like, you don't want to throw them into an attack like you would in some other games. Doing so adds notional units to the defense, which, yes, they're a flipped unit and they make it, kind of painful. So if you're on a high chart, maybe sometimes it's worthwhile. But in general, all they really do is they boost the defender's strength, so you don't want to roll on the table anymore. Anyway, Germans made 2 attacks, one down here, which was a failure. You can see they have a flipped unit. They actually lost 2 Romanians. The Romanian headquarters had to upgrade this. They got a crap roll, but it wasn't a very good attack either. I think it was a 2-to-1 attack or something, but I had a blitz, I believe, maybe not. I had a +1 for flipped, so I thought, well, maybe I can make it in. No attacks across here. I looked at the numbers and they just didn't add up for me. And then up here we took Leningrad, and the Russian Navy escapes. Now, it would go out to sea and be shot up by the German Navy, and it probably has nowhere to go. I can't find the rules for naval overrun. There's, I think, a chance that it gets scuttled and this, that, and the other. We'll not worry about that here. It's not going to have any effect on this scenario in any sense. Here, it was just a normal attack across this line, apparently. That's what I can figure from it. It says you can move normally across them. It doesn't say anything about attacking, but it doesn't say anything either way about it. So, anyway, we made an attack, and we can't advance into Leningrad, so, or into Archangel. This isn't armor, so it can't take advantage of a breakthrough unless it's stacked with armor of equal size. And now it puts it on the Russians again, and they're kind of looking at like, well, I don't have any quick ability to reposition units. If I rail units, they're flipped over and they're not a defensive force anymore. And it's not like this is all that well defended either. So we're going to lose a lot of ground up here in the north. More than happened historically. Well, looks like the 41, 42 line, well, the 41 line looks like it's up here. And that looks pretty close to actually achieving. We're not going to make the breakthrough in the south, though, that could be expected. That's pretty clear. Although I do have a couple of armor, and it's possible in the winter that could happen. Or it's possible I could gain some ground right now and force the Russians to fall back. The Russians pull back, trying to cover Moscow, basically. Still path coming through here, though. 1, 2. Can't get to here, but we can launch an attack on this. And I think things are going to go very poorly for the Russians, although the turn ended, so they got a little bit of a respite because they're going to get some additional forces, which they can throw up into this northern, near Moscow sector. And can probably defend it. We are stopping here. The Russians did a little counterattack here using an an armored attack so they could use the Blitzkrieg table. Got a hex, knocked out 2 units. They got a lucky roll. They got a 10. And by the way, this is cool. I have actually a 10-sided die with a 10 on it. I don't know how many of them I have. Probably a handful. I know I have a black one like that too. But the turn did end, and we're going to call it here. It's not like this isn't an interesting situation. Part of me wants to, I want to keep going, see what happens, see how far the Germans can actually get in this scenario, and also see, whether there's room for a Russian counterattack. It doesn't look like it with the forces that are here. 41. You shouldn't expect one there. I think the Russians did a pretty damn good job holding the south, although that, it's not quite crumbling. But losing Leningrad, losing those have big strategic implications if the game was, continuing. The thing is, though, as much as I might want to keep playing this situation, see how much more the Germans can gain, I probably would want to just keep going. And there's no real reason I couldn't, but there's also no real reason to do so. I kind of want to move on so I can get over to the DoD side. Rap-wise, I'm beginning to get a feel for the game. I guess there's something of a rap here. I'm still making mistakes, there's no question. There's still things I need to look up in the rules quite often. But I feel a lot more comfortable going into the main event after having played this now. We have to look at the naval rules next. So I have a bit of a problem with, I have to disassemble what I set up for this scenario, because basically you have to set up all your force pools by year that they come in, so I have to go through a significant amount of sorting to clean this game up and get ready for the next one, and then I have to sort out all the American and Japanese and probably Commonwealth pieces in order to set up their pieces. But, well, that's part of the expense of this game in time, is setting the whole damn thing up. The old one wasn't quite as bad, but it was always a big deal. It always took an hour or two to get everything all put together in trays or whatever, so you could use it. And then there's this whole pain, I mean, I'm using one tray per country because luckily I have enough, but you need all these different spaces to maintain all the separate kinds of force pools, and then also the yearly force pools to put into the pile as you go. You could always have things bagged by year or something, so that you don't have to use up counter tray space for that. But whatever. All right, let's send this up. I know it's not, it's neither the most exciting situation to watch play-wise, although it was interesting, nor is my play terribly, informative. But this did help me prepare, and maybe I'll be able to approach the bigger thing a little bit better.